What is up, everyone? This is Ahmed Chima. You are listening to the Life of the Brother Man podcast. This is a podcast about leadership and, in particular, frontline leadership. Today, we're talking about how to ask the right questions. And initially, when we started talking about this, I thought this was going to be just a lesson on the Socratic method about how to keep asking questions and keep diving in. But it really is so much more than that. And Jeremy takes us on a couple different directions. So sit back, relax. It's a little bit of a long one. Enjoy the episode. All right, brother man. Brother
Yes, sir.
man
Yes,
from
sir.
Japan.
Chima, Chima.
Who got the keys to my Beamer? What up?
What's up,
Yo,
man? How
how's
you
it going,
doing?
man?
Life is good,
Good,
man.
good.
One day at a time.
Yo, it's been over a month since our last podcast.
Don't
And
count
so
days.
I knew I jinxed it when I said it last time. I was like, we did two in a row. I knew I jinxed it. But I know you got a lot going on. So for the audience that is not aware and doesn't know what's happening in Jeremy's life, Jeremy, number one, he got promoted. So congratulations, Jeremy. Number two, he's in the process of moving back to Atlanta, Georgia,
Yeah.
which is his hometown. So in the last year, you went from Cleveland to Boston to now you're going to Atlanta, Georgia. So this guy is always
Sure.
on the move. In the last couple of weeks, you were also in
Overrated.
Chicago here and there. Like I don't even know
Baltimore.
where you were. Yeah,
Yeah,
Baltimore,
overrated,
Chicago.
man. But you know what I like, man? Like every city is its own experience, right? And, you're going
Mm,
there with a purpose, right? It's not like you're just, meandering or just, trying to find your way. But you have a purpose when you arrive at these cities. So it's like your perspective of the city, you have a mission, but also you want to kind of like do your own personal development, right? Because most of this stuff is business trips. I mean, and the reality of it is all this stuff that we're, listening and talking about are business trips, man. But, you want to connect those dots to where you enjoy it and grow personally as well. And that's why I enjoy it so far
so
anyway, but
what's
it's early.
how like on that subject? How do I, if I'm going to another city for a business trip, let's say I'm going to Cleveland again,
Yeah.
how do I balance that personal and professional growth?
Well, find things that you enjoy doing, right? You always well, we naturally should have hobbies or have natural interests, right? But business first. I mean, it's a business trip. I'm not one to overlook the purpose of why I'm going to a city, right? In your case, if you're going to
Mm,
Cleveland on a business trip, make sure you handle business first. But don't overlook the beauty of the balance and being able to enjoy your personal downtime in Cleveland or whatever
mm.
respective city that you are visiting. Otherwise, you can let work consume you, and that can be toxic. And a lot of people don't know how to balance that. They get so consumed in their work life that it takes away from fulfillment in their personal life.
And that's where you see burnout,
Yeah, for sure.
right?
And that's a real
People
thing,
just,
man.
yeah.
That does exist for sure.
All right, brother man. Uh, you ready to get right into it?
Yeah, man, let's do it for sure.
So the topic I had in mind for today was asking the right question. And so what I want to kick it off with is you see some people, and I'm really talking about in the context of meetings. And let's say I'm the person that needs to extract certain information, or I need to make sure that the people that are in the meeting are not just saying what they want to say, right? And so if I want to get to the root cause of XYZ, how do I start to ask the right questions? What's the mentality? What's the approach that I need to have in asking questions in these meetings or in these scenarios, or even if it's just a one-on-one setting where you and an associate and something happened, you need to figure out what happened or why it happened, right? And so, how do you go about diving deep, asking the right questions?
Knowing your audience first and foremost, I can ask person a question and ask person B the exact same question, but use different verbiage. Know your audience as far as who you're targeting, and you can use that to kind of essentially to have more tact, right? When you talk about naturally, when you go to inquire about something or you're seeking to understand something or diving and peeling back these layers, people tend to put their guard up or can be defensive potentially. So it's all about how you navigate your approach, right? as you transition to what you're aiming at or the information you're trying to unveil, information you're trying to uncover. But it starts with your initial approach. And in order for your target audience to be receptive, you need to make sure that you ease into your questions, right? It's not about coming with an iron fist like, hey, answer this the way I want you to answer it. You know, humans are humans, and naturally we need to make sure that we have the ability to connect and understand your end goal of what information are you trying to dig? What information are you trying to grasp as opposed to walking away unfulfilled? If I have questions, I want to keep asking questions until the questions are answered and fulfilled. Now, it may not always be the answer that I want, but that's not the purpose. You know, you're asking questions not to reconfirm what you already know sometimes, but inevitably, we should be coming with an open mind. You know, we always talk about, you know, two-way conversations, and as we're inquiring about information, don't be closed off, be open-minded to it. And sometimes, you know, the answers that you get may not be what you want to hear, but knowing the right questions to ask comes down to having tact with your approach so you can get genuine and candid feedback and answers to any type of questions that you're peeling back. You got to peel back those layers of the onions, man.
All right, so let's walk through a scenario, right? Let's say I have a person that reports to me and they were supposed to submit a report on Friday at 5 o'clock. And they submitted it. Number one, they submitted it at like 7 o'clock, right? 2 hours late. And also it's all wrong, right? Now, me, I don't want to, like, I'm genuinely just trying to understand what happened. I don't want them to feel defensive. I don't want to feel, you know what I mean? Like, I want to make sure that their guard isn't up when I ask the question. So how would you go about phrasing that? Like, let's walk through an actual scenario.
I like this. I like this. So my first approach would be something candid, right? Like, let's touch bases. Hey, man, what's going on? How you doing, man?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. So first of all, I want to thank you for submitting the report that we spoke about. I know it came across last night, you know, roughly 7 p.m. So thank you for getting that in. Just want to
No
make
problem.
sure that I was clear as far as the expectations, though, because sometimes I can kind of throw a lot of information at once. I want to make sure the expectations were clear because maybe I failed you in the process. I failed myself. It was due at 5 o'clock just to make sure we're on the same page. Any issues, anything going on that I could have helped you, you know, serve you better? How could I have helped you meet that deadline better for future
You know,
reference?
I was really just struggling with it. I tried to get it done by 5 o'clock, but you know, it just took me a little bit longer than I expected.
That's fair. And life happens. You know, we have unexpected variables that can alter our work habits. But just do me a favor, and I promise you, I'm going to cater to you in regards to meeting deadlines. If you ever have an issue come up, just, you know, give me a heads up. Out of respect for myself and out of respect for you, the mutual respect that we have for each other. If you can't meet a deadline, by all means, just let me know so I can justify. Um, I can help justify altering the timeline for sure. But hey, we're in the same corner. Ultimately, it was completed. It looks like it's kind of it could use a little bit of tweaking. So I tell you what, I'm going to bump up that timeline by another day to give you time to kind of revisit it. I think you could have potentially rushed through it. So let's take another look at it just to see if there's any opportunities there that we can kind of evolve it somewhat. But hey, I'm here if you need to. Any support by all means.
That was smooth.
But you got to throw it back at them, man. You can't, because all right, one of them, you know, in this case, somebody failed an expectation, but did we fail them? You know, sometimes we got to point the fingers back at ourselves. So I want to ask and make sure that I set the expectations. Maybe the instructions weren't clear and I could have been more vivid with what we were trying to accomplish here with the presentation of paper or whatever project we're working on. But just make sure they have that support, man. And we've all been in a boat where we're working on something and you feel like you're in it alone. Whether you are or you're not, you should have a support system that if you need resources, those resources are available to you. And sometimes you got to reiterate that.
I think one point that I want to make sure I touch on when you responded, you touched on this too, but the quality that a leader must have, in my opinion. I think one of the things that if you're in a position of leadership and you're a good leader, you have to have this quality is ownership, right? And
Oh,
ownership comes
yeah.
with anything that happens that goes wrong. It's not my team's fault, it's my fault. It's something that I did that I messed up. I have to reevaluate what I did. And so in this case, what you did is like, did I set the expectations right? Right. And I love number one, you're taking ownership for the situation that happened. And number two, what you're doing is you're like he's not on guard or she's not on guard because you're coming in at it like, hey, is this something that I messed up? Like, I know I throw a lot of information at you. Like, let me just make sure that I was clear with it. Right. So
That's
I
real.
think that was really well done.
And the
Appreciate
man,
that.
you have to be, man, as far as the ownership piece, you have to make sure when we talk about accountability, it goes both ways. And anytime we have an opportunity or things don't come back as we expected or deadlines aren't met, maybe the expectations weren't set out or I wasn't clear enough. So yeah, that guidance is huge. And guidance is a quality or characteristic of leadership, strong leadership, I
Yep.
should say.
Absolutely. Next thing I want to jump into a little bit is when we are trying to address issues, a lot of times the first answer we get to our question, like why did this happen, is not the right one, right? So we've seen this with safety incidents that happen, right? The first answer that someone will say, like why did this happen, is not generally the actual root cause, right? And so what we have to do is, keep asking questions. So just wanted to get some advice, some tips on, let's say there's an unknown and you don't know. So we already covered if you know what the information that you're trying to seek out is, how to kind of approach that. But let's say we don't know what the information that we're trying to extract is. How do you go about approaching that?
We should have the ability, as we're communicating, as we're talking about, we should have the ability, as we're dissecting and pulling information out. And I hate to use the term pulling information out because we should be receptive to information that's being put in because it's more genuine. I should be able to close my eyes and hand my audience a paintbrush and have them paint a picture for me using their words. And
Mm.
until I have a picture that's painted with my eyes closed and I fully understand what's being relayed to me, I should continue to ask questions. And it's not necessarily about prying data or prying information out of somebody, but opening up to allow others to pour information into you. So close, eyes
Mm.
closed, handing somebody a paintbrush, and I'm going to ask questions until I have a vivid picture.
Okay, I'm going to say what you said in a different way.
Bring
Ready
it.
for it?
Yeah, yeah, let's do it.
It comes down to one word. I'm going to say what you said in one word. You ready for it? Listen. That's it.
100%.
That's
100%.
it.
But people struggle with that, man. People struggle with the listening piece. People
Mm.
love to talk. People love to hear themselves talk. Sometimes there's no value added. Just love to hear themselves talk. Like you said, listening is what determines that, or what helps drive that.
I think one thing that I've seen is people assume because a certain situation has happened maybe one or two times in the past, they think that, okay, I already know what the root cause is here. So they stop listening because they think they know it's the same thing that happened this one or two other times, right? Where generally we start to see patterns and we're like, okay, boom, this is it, right? So how do we turn that off for a second and take a little bit of time to actually listen to what they're saying, especially if you've seen something like this a few other times before?
Experience can do that, man. Experience can be a major leadership defect, or it could be a huge positive depending on how we use it. So, based on our approach in allowing our past experiences to ruin what we're currently being receptive to, and that's a good call out, man, because anytime we walk into a situation, especially something that we have experience with, we think we know what's going on, and we should allow the audience to either confirm it or teach me something new. Teach me something, prove me wrong, but I want you to pour that information to me. I shouldn't have to, I'm not painting with my tool, I'm not opening my toolbox to paint a picture. I want you to paint that picture for me. But, be receptive to it, be open to it, and allow the audience to teach you something new.
So really it's just about the mindset, right? So making sure that we don't let that come in the way, that experience, we don't let that cloud that painting, right? So don't let you, based on your experience, start painting the picture for them. Let them paint it for you. So I like that analogy. I like the way you worded that. Um, the next thing I wanted to kind of take, so asking the right question is such a valuable tool in so many different circumstances, not just in leadership or in business, but in life, right? So I remember when we started, every time we sat and had lunch with someone that was newer, you had a couple go-to questions, right? So I remember one of them, you know it, right? So we had this like self-serve like market in our cafeteria, and we're sitting there, and the new person, we always ask him the same question, or him or her the same questions. What would you do if our general manager, and let's just call him John, what would you do if John came in, took a bag of chips, didn't pay for it, and just walked out? Right? So asking the right questions to open in other people up in different scenarios. Like I wanna take this in the route of just creating conversation, right? So uh, when meeting new people, engaging people, what are some good principles? What are some things to keep in mind for asking the right questions in those moments? Because sometimes it's not the right moment for that kind of question, right? You know what I mean? So uh, what are some things we should keep in mind when, engaging new people?
I think you have to let your personality show. And man, I say that because people can detect when you're not being genuine, and you can't sustain ingenuous activity, right? Or ingenuous conversation. In due time, it's going to show. It's like a filtration system. The more you talk, the more you speak, um, the more your true form or your true self shows. So early on, just start by being yourself, and kind of taking it back to those days, like you said, in the cafeteria or the break room, so to speak. We were just having fun, man, but we were breaking down that wall to a new audience, to somebody who is new, somebody who we haven't had an opportunity to have lunch with or enjoy a conversation with. But it was having fun in the meantime, but kind of breaking that ice. And that breaking that ice was my tactic to allow someone to walk into their comfort zone, allow someone to
Mm.
open up the door and let me into their world. So as I'm being myself, of course, they're allowing me to walk into their home, so to speak, in a virtual capacity,
That,
of course.
okay, you went really deep right there. Okay, so you're saying when I think one thing we have to establish and make sure that we're kind of clear about is that generally speaking, with the exception of like really outgoing people, right? When we are in a situation where there's new people, people are a little bit on guard and they're not themselves. And so you asking these questions and being yourself, you're kind of opening the door for them to start being themselves and opening up themselves and talking about what their interests are and that kind of thing. Correct?
Yeah, and it's human, it's natural behavior, man. And I'm going to use another analogy. Have you ever been in a room or part of a conversation and somebody says something like extreme, like that makes the air tense or makes anyone uncomfortable, and you have
Never happened.
somebody, oh well,
No, I'm just
keep
kidding.
keep living, keep living. But somebody says something and the whole mood changes in the room. Naturally, you're going to have at least one person that interjects and says something just to bring it back down. And it could be something so
Mm,
subtle like a joke. It could be something subtle like even changing the subject. What's propelling that? Like, what's the purpose of changing the subject? What's the purpose of that joke? To bring everybody back to their comfort zone, to bring everybody back to a sense of normalcy, so to speak. I mean, that's the opportunities that exist when we allow the comfort zone or build a culture of comfort when we talk about a culture of communication.
I think we started this podcast talking about asking the right questions, but really where this is going, if you take a look at it, even when we're talking about making a joke in a tense situation, what it comes down to is just listening in understanding what's going on, right? And I think that is the heart of asking the right questions, is just listening, understanding what's going on, and then making the right call based on that, right? And so as leaders, we have to make sure, whether it's a tense situation, we have to listen, not necessarily for someone to say something, but listen to the vibe per se, right? Listen to understand what's happening, what the dynamic is there, and then make a joke, lighten the mood, whatever we have to do. And so I think the main takeaway I'm getting as of right now is that as leaders, we have to make sure that we develop the skill of listening, and not just listening when someone is speaking, like I'm talking into this mic and you're listening with your headphones on, your Bose QC, whatever they are, but um, sponsored. No, I'm just kidding.
I know, right?
but but not
Man,
just
that's true.
listening. Go ahead.
No, no, that's a good call out, man, because leaders, your stronger leaders know how to read a room, and your stronger readers know when it's their turn to speak versus when it's their turn to listen. And their listening ears are never off. They just know when to interject and use their voice. But it comes down to listening, kind of circling back to it.
Exactly. And so even when we talk about leaders using questions in meetings, for example, they're using these as a tool based on like, okay, someone's saying something, I know what they're saying is not 100% accurate, right? And now they're reacting, now they're interjecting, right? Because they're listening. Now, nowadays we have all these virtual meetings. It's easy to fall into the trap of just pulling something else up, writing like another email, taking care of some other tasks while we're in these meetings. You know what I mean? It's very easy to do that, especially if you have 2 or 3 monitors. Like, you can easily make it look like you're paying attention when you're actually not, right? So leaders, especially in this day and age, you have to make sure you're focused in on the conversation that's happening, and then pull the triggers you need to as the conversation is going on, right? So if someone says something that's not right. And another thing in these meetings, and even one-on-one conversations, leaders ask questions as tools to develop the thinking of people, right? So let's get into that a little bit. Like, how do I, so I know the right answer, right? So let's say we had a certain metric we missed on. Let's say we were supposed to get 10 units out. We only got 9 out. Now, my direct report, I'm asking him about this, right? I want him to start thinking like I'm thinking. I want him to start thinking at a higher level and start uh, really taking more ownership of the whole business in general. How do I ask him? What's the approach that I have to have in asking questions in that scenario?
Let's talk about our roles. Let's begin there. Your role is to be a leader in that sense. So understand that I'm going to this as a leader, and I'm going to walk out with a leader walking side by side with me. I want to make sure that I'm going to pour in information into this individual so they understand the impact. They understand ultimately the impact they have of it, educate them on the process to improve and show and kind of bridge that, right? Earlier you kind of talked about being receptive to information as we're talking about listening. If I'm not present in the moment and allowing that individual to tell me what went wrong, it's not disrespectful to him only. It's disrespectful to yourself, because you're not using your gift as far as allowing yourself to grow. And you're not only
Wow.
wasting their time, but you're wasting your time. And that's what we
Hold
got
on,
to
hold
kind
on.
of
Say that again. Say that again. That was deep.
but that's seriously, man, when we talk about listening, first
I'm
understanding
not
what went
messing, man.
wrong.
Say it again.
When we talk about what went
I don't
wrong,
want to
as
miss
we're
it.
as we're listening, if you're not present in the now, it's not only disrespectful to your audience, but it's disrespectful to
Mm,
yourself,
mm,
because you're wasting your time in the moment. If you're going to be present for
mm,
something, be present physically and mentally. But in this case,
mm.
I want to kind of take it to open up something else. So as I'm listening to what he or she, so as leaders, we get paid to make decisions, right? And this is a case, whether it's an associate, a friend, whoever it is, if it's work related, they're paid to make decisions. Hopefully they make decisions that are an educated decision or an informed decision and are able to justify their actions, able to justify their decisions. Otherwise, they're just otherwise it's more of a it's it's no direction, so to speak. So with that being said, take that as like an education process. Ensure they understand going forward, because if they walk away with no knowledge gained, you wasted their time, you wasted your time. Instill information, develop this individual. So next time, it's a case where, hey, I don't even have to talk to Ahmed about it. Ahmed's clearing the expectations. He understands that we're striving for 10. If he has plans of falling short of that, he's going to escalate to me. He's going to let me know what went wrong based off our prior conversation. Because clearly there's opportunity that I failed him that I could have dropped or gave him new information to kind of improve it.
Mm. That's a really good point. And one thing I want to highlight here is that sometimes I think even the new leaders, they understand their role is to make sure they're developing their people. But it's really like, where do I start? And I think the way you broke it down is that leaders are paid to make decisions. And so what you have to do is push those decisions down. If you're developing your people correctly, the people under you can start making higher and higher level decisions, right? And so what you have to do is make sure you're giving them the information and education to make those decisions the proper way, right? And so that's, for me personally, I know I struggled with developing those around me, and I think that really puts it in a new perspective, and it makes it clear what I need to do, right? It's like, these are the decisions that I'm making on a daily basis, monthly basis, weekly basis, and this is what I need my direct report to start doing, right? So thank
And
you for that.
Ahmed, and you brought up a good point. When you're talking about just kind of circling back as far as decisions that we make, sometimes we're going to fail. I mean, that's the reality of it. We are going to fail. We're going to fail numerous times. That's life. How we recover, how we learn, how we grow, how we develop, it's through our failures, not through our accomplishments. But let's keep that same scenario relevant. So though this individual, and this is where we talk about being receptive, this individual could come to me and say, hey, yes, we only made 9, we were striving for 10. However, the decision I made was the lesser of two evils. He justified his decision, as opposed to not making any. He was able to at least salvage and save 9 of the 10 units, as opposed to, it's a blessing in disguise. But sometimes we're blind to those blessings, right? Because we walk into it and only see the 1 unit miss, as opposed to the 9 that were made.
Yeah, so there's like 3 different points there that you just kind of brought in my head. So number 1 is that we have data points. There are different metrics, but those data points are never the whole story. And really, if you're not actively involved in the process and understand everything that happened, like, the numbers can only tell you so much, right? So when we're trying to fix things, when we're trying to actually improve our processes, we have to go in and ask the right questions and then engage people and make sure that we extract the right information to put the narrative around those data points, right? And then based on the narrative with those data points, you can then start taking action in the right direction. Second thing I wanted to touch on that you brought up is that it is blanking. I'm blanking on it right now, but it was going to be the most amazing point that I think I did in this podcast. So, okay, I think I remember it now. So you brought up, what did you bring up? You brought up
just the lesser of two evils based off our decisions that we
okay.
make.
I remember. Yep. All right. So if you've been following this podcast, one of the episodes that we did was finding your voice, right? So now when we're talking about developing your team, developing people that report to you, number 1 is, are they equipped to make the decision? And then number 2 is, when they make the decision, can they justify it? And that goes right into how we talked about finding your voices. You have to be able to justify the decisions you make, right? Equipping your team with the information and knowledge to make those decisions, and then empowering them to justify those decisions will allow them to develop their voice and grow as leaders. Yeah.
That
I
development
wish,
piece is huge, man.
yeah, I wish I got that in the first try and I didn't have to like think through it. You know
That's the
what
beauty of it. You let it marinate for a little bit. And that's the beauty of like culture, man. When we talk about developing our team and the beauty of like different personalities and connecting dots, like let's compare it to a book. Let's compare life to a book, right? I mean, how you read a book and how I read a book could be completely different. Sometimes I skip words. I'll be honest. I'm not ashamed. I skip words at times. I understand the message,
Didn't you
but I
go to
skip
Harvard?
words. Yeah, but I was one credit short. So, so here's what I'm getting at. The words that I may skip, you may have not skipped those, but the words you may have overlooked were the words that I read. So the beauty of it, when we talk about developing others around you, you're slowly developing yourself to connect those dots.
You got to drop the mic after that one.
I'm telling
You
you,
trying to
man,
one
that's the
up me,
reality
man?
of it. That's
I
the
have my killer moment right there. Now you come in with your analogy and everything. Come on, man.
that's the beauty of life, man. A lot of people.
You set the
I've
bar too
been,
high, man.
man, I'm telling you, I've been in work cultures that people are afraid to develop those around them in fear of them surpassing them. And that is one of the most selfish acts that I think we can do as humans.
Let's talk about that for a minute, right? Why? So I think there's two things that I really want to touch on, and um, I think me, someone who is not as tenured in their career, really needs to make sure that we're on the lookout for this kind of thing and that we steer clear and avoid falling into this ourselves. But one thing, the first thing is, why do people have that? Like, what, where does that come from? Is that like just insecurity? Like, what,
Yeah.
how, like, how could someone, I just don't get it.
And Ahmed, it's good that you don't get it, but you took the words out of my mouth. I mean, the first thought that resonated with me was insecurity. If you're afraid to develop those around you, if you're in fear of those they may surpass you, they may be your boss one day, so to speak. That's the beauty of it. Mission accomplished. You should want to make those around you better. But at the same time, you're developing yourself because now I feel more confident. I'm walking away more confident because now I feel like I can develop leaders. I can instill information in those that may not have been able to see the light had I not exchanged information, had I not cultivated thoughts that kind of allowed their mentality to blossom. So that's the beauty of it. It's always going to be a gift, even in the darkest nights, right? And this is a case
Mm.
where you shouldn't shy away from it. By all means, it's fruits of your labor when it all comes to fruition.
Now, the second thing is, let's say we're in a situation where we have a boss that does, like, they know you're talented, they know you got potential. They're scared of you, right? So they're not teaching you anything. They're like, man, this guy, he's a stud, he's an all-star. If I like, he's gonna take my job. Like, how do you actually? That's interesting story. I'm reading a book called The Ride of a Lifetime. Bob Iger. Have you heard the name?
No, I'm not. Educate me.
So Bob Iger was the CEO of Disney for a while. I think he's like the chairman of the board now. And so he talks about ABC was acquired by Disney, right? And so part of the deal was that Bob Iger would stay on and be part of that executive team for at least 5 years. And so Bob Iger, as CEO of ABC at the time, he was like, man, this is like, I don't know if I want to go into this other culture. Now I'm stepping down a step. You know what I mean? So one of the things that they told him was like, look, if you play your cards right, you're going to be running Disney at one point, right? So
Yeah.
he stays there for a couple of years, and they hire. Initially, he thought he was going to be the COO, which is the second in line to the CEO, essentially. So this guy named Michael, I forgot his last name, was the CEO, and he was thinking that he was going to get the COO spot. Nope, they brought in someone else,
Mm.
and this guy just sucked, right? Absolute culture killer, everything. Bob's like, I'm going to stay. I'm going to stick this out. Like, I got a 5 year deal, whatever. So he stays. That guy gets fired. Now he's like, all right, now I'm going to get COO for sure. Nope. He just ran the company without a COO for like a bunch of years
Uh-huh.
because he was afraid like he was essentially like insecure. I don't want this guy to take my job, right? And so what happens is that eventually things get so bad, like when you're a CEO running a company that big, right? You can't, right? And so what Bob was saying is that at some points he would start letting me into some of the decisions, showing me some of the things, and then you just go cold turkey, just like ignore me for like a week, not say anything to me, kind of keep me at like an arm's length, and not, because he had this, like, he knew at some point, like, I need to train this guy to kind of take more
Yeah.
ownership, but he's also afraid that, like, look, this guy's going to take my job, right? So what happened in that scenario, in that case, is that things got so bad in the company internally with the board and the CEO that the board members, one of the, like, Walt Disney's nephews or something, essentially started a campaign to get the CEO kicked out. And so that went through pretty successfully, and they kind of made it so that, hey, Michael, you have to pick a successor, and like you're not going to renew your contract when it's done. And so that's how he kind of
Wow.
ascended the throne. But my question to
Wow.
you is, like, let's say you're in this situation where,
Mhm.
like, you're just essentially it's a pain, right? Like,
Yeah.
some days you're feeling like, man, like I'm learning a lot. I'm next in line. I'm gonna get this. Like, I'm getting more responsibility. I'm seeing what goes into the decisions. Some days it's just like, dude, this guy doesn't even want to talk to me, right? Like,
Yeah.
how do you deal with that, and what do you
Yeah.
do in that situation?
So, and I'm glad you touched on this earlier to the audience base that has heard earlier podcasts in which we spoke about finding your voice. That's a beautiful thing, but that's half the battle, right? Because the other half of it is now that you found your voice, knowing when to use your voice. And I'm going to connect the dot to the question in which you just asked. I would use my voice in a case like this. It applies to a public setting. I'm not going to work through my boss anymore. I'm going to allow the conference calls with multiple ears, a larger audience base, so to speak. That's when I'm going to voice my ideas. To not only allow one set of ears to hear it, because that information can be relayed differently. But when you have 10, 15, 20 different pairs of ears on the call,
Mm.
it's going to be some light bulbs going off to say, hey, um, Jeremy brought this point up, that's when we talk about the credibility piece, right? When we talk about taking ownership of information, ownership of things that we're putting out there as we use our voice, use your platform in a way that if you feel like information is going to be taken away from you, information is going to potentially be disclosed because in efforts of suppressing your development, then increase your visibility on your conference calls or increase your
Mm.
visibility to a wider audience base. Otherwise, it's not going to be a one-on-one conversation because you might lose the narratives change when there's different sets of ears. And it sucks, man, but we've all
It's a
done that.
game, man.
We've all been in situations where you tell somebody something and somebody else and they want to take credit for it.
Mm.
It's flattering. It's flattering that my idea, my voice, my thought is something that you want to take ownership of. But
I
in
love how
the
you
in
worded
the
that.
but in the sense of it, let others hear how beautiful Ahmed is. Let others hear how beautiful your mind is based off your thoughts, and it's coming directly from the source, from yourself, as opposed to coming from the manager in which you report to. So to answer your question, just open your audience base up.
Mm. That's a really good point. And then let's say, I think that's a good point for making sure that you don't get uh, like cast aside. But what about like the actual, let's say my manager doesn't want to develop me at all. Like, how do I go about developing myself?
Know your resources, know your tools. You don't always, the company is not managed and ran by one individual ever,
Oh,
ever.
wait, because I mean,
Give
I
me an
don't know if
example.
you get, I don't know if you get this or not, but a lot of times I get texts from my friends. So I work at Amazon, right? So I get texts from my
Yeah, yeah.
friends like, "Hey, I ordered a product. Can you what's
Oh
the
my
return policy on this?
goodness. Yeah,
I'm like, yeah, let me just phone Jeff on this one.
I was hoping I was the only one, but yeah, but that's the that's the thing, man. People assume you are the grill of information when it comes to everything, based off your employer. But yeah, man, that's it. It comes down to just being able to utilize your resource. When we talk about owning your own development, don't limit or stunt your growth through one individual. And you got to be able to understand how to navigate, and understanding how to navigate is being able to utilize resources that are available to you, and how you respond to those walls you hit, how you overcome the walls you hit. Those are your true growth opportunities. And that's when you need to make sure that you're understanding the importance of the relationships that are built beyond one person. And that comes down to finding your voice and knowing when to interject and when to use your voice.
Appreciate it, Jeremy. Thank you for taking the time. Is there anything else you wanted to touch on real quick?
No, man, I enjoyed it. I think the voice piece and unison with the leadership piece is huge. And I just challenge everybody to, in the process and journey of life, as you're developing yourself, and you should always be developing yourself. Life is a development process. We're never going to be a finished product, or you should never see your individuality as a finished product. But as you're developing yourself, find the beauty behind developing others and enjoy and walk that journey with others as well.
Yep. My key takeaway from today, the main point that I want to make sure that I remember and I communicate across in this closing remarks of this forum, is that asking the right questions comes down to one thing, and that's listening, right? And listening not just for the verbal information that people are saying, but also reading the room, reading the expressions, reading what they're saying without saying it, right? And then asking the right questions, digging deeper, and having the right tact, asking the right questions in the right way is so important when it comes to not just understanding and extracting information, but really developing those around you. And thank you all for joining. This is the Life of the Brother Man podcast. We'll see you next time.
Until next time,
All right.
good people.